Los Angeles in the 1930s wasn't just a land of palm trees, red carpets, and silver-screen dreams. Behind the movie magic and sun-drenched boulevards, a darker machinery was turning, a network of influence and corruption that gripped the city from the mayor's office to the police force. This wasn't random or chaotic. It was a well-oiled system of backroom deals, political puppets, and organized crime. It was so coordinated and embedded into LA's civic structure that locals began calling it the City Hall Gang. This shadowy alliance of businessmen, mobsters, city officials, and police brass quietly dictated public policy, controlled vice operations, and systematically erased dissent. And by the time most Angelenos realized what was happening, the damage had already been baked into the foundation of their government. At the center of this machinery was Charles Good Time Charlie Crawford, a political fixer and crime boss who operated with impunity. Known around downtown as the Gray Wolf of Spring Street, Crawford wasn't just a mobster. He was a middleman between underworld profits and city power. He ran brothels, gambling dens, and bootlegging operations, but his real genius was in relationships. Crawford had politicians on speed dial, city council members in his pocket, and a line to the mayor's office that most journalists couldn't get close to. His longtime ally was Kent Kane Parrott, a political boss whose name rarely appeared in newspapers but whose influence was unrivaled. Parrott operated as the de facto mayor behind the scenes, using actual mayor George E. Cryer, who served from 1921 to 1929 as a public puppet. While Cryer gave speeches and cut ribbons, it was Parrott who made decisions often informed by Crawford's criminal interests. This trio, Cryer, Parrott, and Crawford, formed the nucleus of what came to be called the City Hall Gang, and they operated with an almost corporate structure. The profits from vice, illegal liquor, prostitution, underground casinos were funneled directly into campaign coffers, law enforcement payrolls, and slush funds for bribes and intimidation. In return, the gang ensured that investigations were quashed, honest officials were removed, and reformers were discredited. The arrangement was so stable and efficient that it lasted for years without serious challenge. Inside City Hall, the corruption wasn't subtle. It was openly baked into the system. Police Chief James E. Davis, who led the LAPD during the 1920s and 1930s, was notoriously more loyal to Parrott than to the public. Under Davis, the police department didn't just fail to stop crime, it often enforced the will of LA's ruling elite. The department's notorious Red Squad, under Chief Davis's right-hand man Red Hines, operated more like a private militia than a public service. The Red Squad's job wasn't to protect Angelenos, it was to attack political enemies. They targeted labor unions, leftist organizers, and anyone suspected of having communist sympathies. These weren't peaceful arrests either. Organizers were beaten, meetings were disrupted with violence, and homes were raided without warrants. And it was all done under the false pretense of protecting the city from political extremism. In reality, they were protecting the business interests of LA's ruling class. What held this entire system together was bribery and mutual benefit. Crawford's brothels and gambling halls generated immense profits, but they needed to operate in peace. That peace came with a price: monthly payouts to police captains, city council members, and influential city employees. In return, these public officials ensured there were no raids, no press leaks, and no political interference. Parrott's political machine then made sure the right people were elected or appointed so the protection cycle could continue. If a journalist dug too deep, they'd be offered a bribe or blackmailed with personal dirt. If that didn't work, physical threats weren't off the table. It was a self-sustaining loop of power and profit, where everyone in the circle benefited, and anyone outside it was quickly pushed out of the way. But the gang's influence extended beyond vice. Their reach infiltrated every level of city bureaucracy. Health boards were manipulated to approve businesses owned by allies. Zoning commissions mysteriously changed rules to benefit developers with underworld connections. Even the city's tax offices seemed to look the other way when certain powerful names came up in audits. And when courageous reformers like Clifford Clinton, founder of Clifton's Cafeteria and a civic watchdog, tried to expose the rot, they were immediately met with resistance. Clinton used his own money to fund investigations into City Hall corruption, publishing detailed exposés. His efforts shocked the public, but they also triggered massive retaliation. He faced frivolous libel lawsuits, had health inspectors harass his restaurants, and was even the target of an attempted poisoning. One of the biggest obstacles reformers faced was the complicity of the local press. Several major newspapers were reluctant to publish damaging stories about the City Hall gang. Some were outright bought off with advertising money or backdoor favors. Others feared retaliation, and when journalists or editors refused to play along, they often found themselves out of work, or worse. At the height of this power structure, even the mayor's office used public resources to stonewall investigations. Mayor Frank L. Shaw, who served from 1933 to 1938, continued the system after Cryer, relying on Parrott and Crawford's successors to maintain control. Shaw's administration became infamous for blatant pay-to-play politics and for using lawsuits as weapons against the press. Meanwhile, police violence continued to be used as a tool to silence dissent. The LAPD under Davis and the Red Squad didn't just go after criminals, they went after anyone who challenged the status quo. Labor leaders were arrested for organizing strikes. Protesters were beaten in public, with no fear of disciplinary action. Surveillance was conducted on teachers, students, and even religious leaders who spoke out against inequality or police violence. The entire force had been weaponized, not to enforce laws, but to protect the business interests of the elite. As LA's criminal underworld continued to grow, high-profile figures like Bob Gans, known as the Slot Machine King, emerged as new power players. Gans's empire was built on illegal slot machines placed in bars, grocery stores, and restaurants across LA. But these machines remained in operation because Gans had protection from the same network that protected Crawford. The police ignored the gambling, politicians accepted the profits, and City Hall quietly looked away. This convergence of political authority and criminal enterprise created a cabal of wealth and control that no single election or investigation could disrupt. Eventually, however, public pressure reached a boiling point. By the late 1930s, civic groups, religious organizations, and a few independent journalists began organizing. The tipping point came in 1938, when a mass recall movement led to the ousting of Mayor Shaw. His replacement, Fletcher Bowron, ran on a reformist platform and delivered, at least in part. Bowron immediately disbanded the Red Squad, initiated mass audits, and pushed Parrott and other power brokers out of city government. For a brief moment, it seemed like LA might finally break free from the grip of institutional corruption. But even Bowron couldn't fully root out the system. Many of the same players simply changed titles or shifted influence behind the scenes. The culture of payoffs, quiet favors, and insider deals didn't vanish. It just evolved. And as the city moved into the post-war boom, those informal power networks were taken over by new elites, studio moguls, real estate developers, and construction tycoons. Corruption didn't end. It just got better at hiding. The legacy of the City Hall gang still echoes today. It's in the way power is concentrated among a few wealthy interests. It's in the backroom deals that decide zoning changes and police budgets. It's in the history that rarely makes its way into school textbooks or tourist brochures. In the 1930s, Los Angeles got a crash course in how institutional corruption works, not through chaos but through structure, not through violence alone but through cooperation between criminals and the state. For all its sunshine and stardom, the LA of the 1930s showed what happens when crime, politics, and business merge, and the people in charge stop pretending to care who's watching.